I took the blame for a crime I didn't commit. Was my silence the real price of love? The single worst thing about living with this secret is that I'm the only one who remembers the lie, while the man I saved believes the lie has become his truth. I'm Daniel, 45 now, and for 2 decades, I have worn the cloak of a criminal to shield the person I love most. The question isn't whether I regret the time lost, it's whether my eternal silence is the actual price of love, or if it's just the price of my own cowardice. 20 years ago, my life was immaculate, neatly framed, and utterly predictable. I was 25, working as a junior analyst at a mid-sized investment firm, engaged to a wonderful woman, and following the expected upward trajectory of a responsible, stable man. I was the rock of our small family, the one who always fixed things. My younger brother, Caleb, was 20 and the exact opposite. He was brilliant, charismatic, and dangerously impulsive. Caleb was supposed to be the family's true star. He had the magnetic personality and the soaring intellect. But he had a volatile, self-destructive streak, fueled by crushing insecurity and a rapidly escalating gambling addiction that we all tried desperately to ignore. Our parents, who were already weary from years of modest living, put all their fragile hopes into Caleb's future. I was more than just a brother. I was his unofficial guardian, the one who covered the early debts and cleaned up the inevitable messes. My stability was his safety net, but the net had become increasingly frayed. The crash came hard and fast. Caleb had landed a prestigious internship at a rival brokerage firm. He saw it as his chance to clear his mounting debts in one desperate, brilliant move. Instead, fueled by panic and delusion, he executed a classic, amateur fraud scheme, attempting to embezzle $500,000 to cover his losses and betting it all on one disastrous stock market gamble. The scheme fell apart in less than a week, leaving a gaping, obvious hole in the firm's accounts. I got the frantic, tear-soaked call just after midnight. I drove straight to his empty dorm room, finding him crumpled on the floor, barely coherent. The firm's security team was already closing in. Caleb wasn't just facing prison, he was facing a complete, absolute breakdown. His fragile mental state couldn't withstand the shame, the confrontation, or the sheer horror of his consequences. He was terrified, not of the law, but of losing the carefully constructed image of potential he had always shown our parents. The reality hit me with the force of a physical blow. If Caleb went to prison, he wouldn't survive it. His talent, his youth, his spark, everything that made him him, would be extinguished, replaced by the crushing weight of institutional brutality. The next few hours were the longest of my life. Caleb was incapable of making a coherent statement, let alone defending himself. The evidence was damning, but it was all circumstantial. The transactions were routed through his intern account, but the access log was sloppy. That sloppy log, I realized, was the key to his life and the end of mine. I looked at the facts. I was 25, established, with a good but not irreplaceable career. I had savings. I was emotionally grounded. If I took the fall, I could survive it. I would lose my career in finance and likely my fiancé, but I could endure the years behind bars. Caleb, at 20, with his addiction, his fragility, and his immense debt to our parents' hopes, would be destroyed. It was a simple, brutal equation of loss minimization. I sat there in the quiet dorm room, looking at the panic-stricken boy who was also my brother, and I made the only choice I thought a protector could make. I would take the blame. The swap was agonizingly simple. Over the next 3 days, while Caleb lay sedated and watched by a family friend, I went to work. I used my knowledge of the system and my own firm's practices to subtly reroute the paper trail. I fabricated small, precise details, a transfer made from my home IP address, a phone call placed from my burner phone, a false entry in a shared online ledger. I became the principal actor, transforming Caleb's amateur panic into my own calculated, greedy corporate fraud. I made it look like the established older brother, greedy for more, had used his younger sibling's account as an unwitting conduit. When the investigators finally came, they didn't even question Caleb. They came straight for me, armed with the evidence I had meticulously planted. I cooperated fully, signing the confession and pleading guilty early to get the best possible deal for the purported damage. My rationale was unshakable. I traded my freedom for his future. I traded my 4 walls of comfort for his unlimited horizon. Would you sacrifice your own freedom and potential for 5 years to save someone you love from total ruin, knowing that choice would permanently destroy your own ability to rebuild your professional life? I went into it with open eyes. I pled guilty to wire fraud and theft of services. My sentence was 5 years in a federal penitentiary. The moment the judge's gavel struck, the world I knew ceased to exist. My fiancé left me, unable to comprehend the betrayal of trust. My promising career dissolved instantly. But the overwhelming feeling wasn't one of regret, it was a devastating, terrifying sense of peace. I had bought Caleb's future, and I had protected him from the crushing reality of his own mistake. The initial days in prison were brutal, a stark, desolate environment where my intellect and professional polish were utterly meaningless. But the sacrifice became my shield. I didn't have to face the shame of my own moral failure, because I hadn't failed. I had committed a massive act of love. That conviction became my inner strength. Caleb's visits were the only thing that mattered. At first, he was a wreck, guilt-ridden, weeping, begging me to tell the truth. But I silenced him with a cold, firm stare. You will never, ever mention this again, I told him. You will use this time. You will get sober, go back to school, and become the man we both know you can be. If you waste this second chance, then my sacrifice becomes the crime. That quiet threat worked. Caleb slowly transformed. His visits became less about guilt and more about his life outside. He started sending me letters, typed pages detailing his sobriety, his renewed focus, his acceptance back into university to study law. My small, sterile cell became his archive of success. I lived vicariously through his victories. His life became the purpose of my suffering. I was a man living a false sentence, but his truth gave my confinement meaning. My parents, broken by the initial crisis and the unexpected severity of my arrest, visited me occasionally. They knew. They didn't know the mechanical details of the swap, but they understood the unspoken truth of my protective nature. They never said anything about it. Their gratitude was a silent, agonizing pressure, a constant reminder that my lie was the oxygen that allowed their own lives to continue. That collective silence became the weight of our family. 5 years felt like an eternity compressed into a moment. I walked out of prison at 30, blinking into a world that was brighter, faster, and utterly indifferent to my sacrifice. I had been released, but the scarlet letter of a felony fraud conviction followed me like a shroud. The contrast between my reality and Caleb's was staggering. I couldn't get back into finance, my record was poison. I ended up taking a low-level security guard job, a position that demanded quiet vigilance and no independent thought. I was a man with a mind built for strategy, now watching surveillance monitors in a darkened office lobby. Caleb, on the other hand, was soaring. He was 25, clean, sober, and on the fast track at a prestigious corporate law firm. The irony was a cruel, perfect punchline. He was everything I had forfeited. He was charming, successful, and he had learned to wear the mantle of reformed young man who overcame adversity perfectly. He was incredibly generous to me. He bought me a small, modest apartment, paid off my lingering debts, and constantly pressed cash into my hand. But the assistance wasn't offered with brotherly closeness, it was offered with a cold, distant pity, the pity of the successful for the broken. He had internalized the lie so thoroughly that he genuinely saw me as the man who had been consumed by greed and stupidity, and himself as the innocent victim who had overcome my betrayal. The unspoken silence had become a chasm between us. Our conversations were polite, formal reports. He talked about his clients, his fiancée, his bright, expansive future. I talked about my shift rotation and the weather. He had used the time and the freedom I gave him, but he had never earned the freedom by confronting the truth or by acknowledging the full scope of my sacrifice. He had simply stepped over my fallen body and continued his ascent. What would you do when the person you saved treats you with pity for the crime you committed for them, never acknowledging the truth? I hated him for his comfort in the lie, but I loved him for the man he had become, the man who would have never existed without my ruin. 15 years passed in this agonizing equilibrium. I continued to work in security, functional but creatively and professionally stunted. Caleb, now 40, was a powerhouse. He was a partner in his firm, married with 3 children, and exactly the successful, powerful man I had always known he could be. The quiet tragedy of our family reached its peak 2 years ago when Caleb announced his campaign for state legislature. He was running on a platform of criminal justice reform, advocating for second chances and redemption. His campaign narrative was slick, moving, and utterly built on my back. He spoke eloquently about his challenging past, vaguely referencing financial impropriety that almost ruined his family. He often mentioned his older brother, Daniel, who served time for a terrible, youthful mistake driven by misplaced ambition. Caleb painted a picture of the older brother as the cautionary tale, the one who failed so that Caleb could learn and thrive. That narrative was my final, crushing blow. The crime I took the blame for was now being weaponized for his political gain, twisting the reality into a grotesque parody of my sacrifice. My lie was no longer just protecting him, it was actively elevating him at the expense of my own character. He had not only used my freedom, but he was now standing on my grave to reach higher ground. I realized then that the silence I maintained wasn't the price I paid for his love, it was the price I paid for his potential. And that potential, now fully realized, was a successful man who was, fundamentally, a monumental lie. I looked at the campaign photos. Caleb, handsome, poised, surrounded by his beautiful, innocent family. I looked at myself. 45, scarred by prison time, living an anonymous life, forever defined by a felony I didn't commit. I could destroy him with a single phone call. I could send an anonymous, documented tip to a rival journalist, detailing the subtle paper trail I left 20 years ago, the trail that proved Caleb's original guilt and my intentional fabrication of evidence. The resulting scandal would end his career, shatter his family, and finally, after 20 years, clear my name. But the thought brought no satisfaction. It only brought the chilling realization that if I told the truth, I wouldn't just be ruining Caleb, I'd be ruining the good he was now doing, the family he built, and the beautiful, fragile life I had paid for with my youth. His destruction wouldn't redeem me, it would only make me the second criminal in the family, the one who destroyed lives out of bitter jealousy, not out of love. The silence is agonizing, but it is the only true kindness left. I took the blame for a crime I didn't commit, and my silence is the real, continuing price of love, a permanent sentence of living with a shattered identity, watching the man I saved soar, and knowing that my soul will never be set free because his success depends on my imprisonment. I am trapped in the love I offered 20 years ago. If confessing your truth would destroy the person you love but finally set your soul free, would you do it? Or is the ultimate sacrifice accepting that your freedom is less important than their peace? If this raw emotional story of ultimate sacrifice and the crushing weight of a permanent secret resonated with you, please hit the like button, share this profound narrative, and subscribe to follow my haunted journey.